Welcome to Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine. I'm your host, Jill Jardine, Master's in Counseling Psychology, longtime astrologer, psychic healer, and yogi. In today's episode, we have part 2 of Shakti Das, Johnny Coe, and Padma Das, Stuart Peak, presenting music and their information on the fusion of Indian Irish music. Go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't heard it, but we have more for you today, so stay tuned. I'm happy to welcome the duo Kalyana, Stuart Peak and Johnny Coe, playing a fusion of Indian and Irish music. Part 2. Johnny Coe is a musician, sadhu, and teacher of Nada Brahma yoga. He began playing music at a very young age and studied drum and percussion throughout his childhood. His first music heard was from the singing traditions of Ireland, then jazz and traditional folk music from throughout the world. After a near-death experience as a very young child, he began to remember past lives and had conscious spiritual awareness. After performing in various bands and as a solo performer receiving various awards, Johnny Coe also began studying and receiving initiations in multiple tantric traditions of Tibet and India. Johnny Coe has been performing and teaching throughout the U.S. and abroad for many years, performing traditional music of Ireland as well as practicing Kirtan and Nada Brahma yoga. Stuart Peak, aka Padma Das, is an accomplished multi-instrumentalist. Stuart is a highly sought-after session leader, performer, and teacher of Irish music. Stuart is a champion guitarist, an Irish banjo player, and an esteemed tin whistle player. As a teacher, Stuart has taught workshops at the New England Folk Festival, the Irish Cultural Center of New England, and the prestigious South Shore Conservatory. Stuart is considered one of New England's premier Irish musicians and has appeared in many media publications, radio, and television. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome back Johnny Coe, aka Shakti Das, and Stuart Peak, aka Padma Das, in the duo of Kalyana. Beautiful piece by Kalyana. What was the name of that piece? And you should tell our audience what instruments are being played as well, because they're so enchanting and mesmerizing.
Well, I'm playing a djembe, which is not an Indian instrument at all. It's an African drum.
There's some more fusion.
But I'm also playing at various times a bowran, which is a native Irish drum, which is also a frame drum. But I didn't play it on that, but I will be. And Stu can tell you a little bit about that as well, how it connects.
Yeah, and I have various whistles here, some higher pitch, some lower pitch. That was considered a low whistle. And basically, a whistle in the Irish tradition is basically just an end-blown flute. So there's side-blown flutes, which you find in India and in Ireland, and then there's also the end-blown flutes, which you also find in India and Ireland. And believe it or not, they have almost the identical same scale.
They do.
They're played the exact same way. So if you play tin whistle, you can play a bansuri or any number of those types of instruments. Once you learn that type of that traditional repertoire. And the name of the piece that we played was the Dunmore Lasses. So that's a traditional, it's a reel, but it's usually played as a slower piece. And we thought that would go well together with the flute and the drum.
Sounds beautiful. And you've been delving deeper into this connection between the Irish and the Indian music. Stuart, what can you share with our audience?
Yeah, so when I get a little technical about some of the music theory that shapes the two traditions, basically. And in modern music, we talk about major and minor, but there are these ancient modes of music that existed before major and minor, and basically it's stuff that's kind of in between.
Okay.
And there was a resurgence of these types of modalities in the 60s during the folk revival and some of those bands that were popular here in America, even kind of using those scales. A lot of famous musicians did that, and people thought, well, that's a very interesting sound, so sometimes they associate it with the 60s, when in fact we're talking about going back hundreds of years before, where that music was popular in medieval times or Renaissance times. And,
wow, that's so cool.
Right. So people don't realize that some of the sounds that they're listening to or the scales they're listening to are actually ancient modalities. So the ones that we hear most often in Irish music and in Indian music are we call Mixolydian and Dorian. So Mixolydian and Dorian are kind of in between major and minor. That's really the best way to describe them. And basically, if you were to hear the different sounds, and I have a guitar here that I was going to demonstrate on. We'll probably pick up okay on the mic here. But basically, a lot of people are familiar with a major chord structure. So we have this 1-4-5 structure, which is basically almost all of folk music and a lot of American and European music has this structure. All it means is that if we were to take, for instance, a D scale, and we played that, up to the. A lot of people are familiar with that. That's a typical octave or 8-note scale. We just take the one note, the fourth note, and the fifth note, and whatever chord, and a chord technically is actually 2 notes or more. Usually we play tunes in triads, which would indicate 3, which would basically be like a chord which would sound like this. Okay? But to explain the Mixolydian and Dorian, if we have a major chord structure, it sounds like this. That's a 1, 4, and 5. But in Mixolydian or Dorian, we hear this. So that has a really different type of sound. It has a more ancient sound. And what I tell people are like, why does Irish music sound like it sounds? It's because Irish music is based on a lot of it is based on the ancient modes. There is a lot of major, but there's not what we call true minor in Irish music. It's actually an ancient mode or a Dorian or Mixolydian mode. So when we heard that, we're basically substituting a lot of the time that one chord, but that one chord makes all the difference. Indian music is the same way. It actually shares that chord structure as well as the scales. So that's one of the reasons why when Johnny and I sit down to put together a piece of music, they go together seamlessly. Whatever chant he's going to come up with, I can come up with a melody for that. I can hear in the chants the melodies that exist in Ireland. So I have this strange memory for tunes and tune names. But in Irish music, we tend to not read off sheet music. We tend to memorize all the music that we play. It's actually the same thing in the Indian tradition. It's either passed down orally, as they say, and it's still to this day. Many indigenous folk musics are passed down by individuals and not necessarily by a book or by taking a lesson or a class or anything like that.
And it's an energy transmission when you learn it as well.
It is.
It's definitely regarded, that way.
Yeah. So the energies of the two music, and we talked about this a little bit in the first part of the podcast, is that because Sanskrit is an energy-based language, and the Irish and the kind of lyrical, lilt of the Irish language as well, they go hand in hand. So the connection might be that we have a lot of Sanskrit words that exist in the Irish language. Now, there's been many different lectures and workshops and things that people have talked about the connection between language and music. And I actually attended one of these at the Highland Games one time up in New Hampshire. And the discussion was, why does the music, of certain type of people sound a certain way? So if we take two well-known types of music, types of Celtic music, which encompasses Scottish and Irish music, and a few others, the Scottish have a more guttural way of speaking. We all know how that accent sounds. And the Irish have what they call a more lyrical way of speaking. So it's almost like when they talk, it's like doodle-day, da, type of thing. And so when you hear that in your ear, especially as a musician, because musicians tend to pick up things. We'll hear like an alarm, or we hear like we heard this low hum the other day at a gig, and I said to Johnny, I said, that's actually in D. So it's, and we're trying to figure out what it was. So musicians in their head, we train ourselves to listen to these things so that we can pick up music quickly and we can do the craft. But basically, if we talk about, the music in Ireland is more lyrical, as a certain flow. Johnny just talked about the baran here, which is the traditional Irish drum. That actually comes from a Sanskrit word, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So it has a direct connection in that sense. From the Sanskrit word is badira. And then there's the word that looks like in either Old Irish or New Irish or Gaelic, looks like bodar is how it's spelled, but it's actually pronounced bower. And that's only a pronunciation difference. And so that would be the bauran, which would mean, and so in Sanskrit it actually means deaf. In Irish it means the same thing, deaf, dull sounding, which then also translated into the drum, because the drum has that thump, that kind of boom. It has that sound. So almost
Again,
a dull
there it
sound.
is. It's the sound that
It's
it
the
makes.
sound that it
describes,
makes. So
is the
we're
word.
talking about music, which is completely auditory, right? And then when people are speaking in languages too, that type of thing, it all really ties in. You talked about the Boyne.
Yeah.
Yeats, the famous poet, said that Ireland belonged to Asia before the Battle of the Boyne. He made that quote. There's a guy named Charles Mackay who did the etymology of a lot of Gaelic words and found that there were numerous Sanskrit connections. There's also Sanskrit in Greek and Latin, which also were explored. But basically, when Charles was saying that there's two Irish words that make the word Asia,
That's right,
he made the connection that the word Aish, which is Gaelic for back, or Old Irish for back, and then which is either like the country or the land, place, right?
Place,
So Asia, if you put the two together, are the back land or the back country, which would indicate the historical beginning of those people.
Wild. Love this
Of course,
information.
there's lots of theories as well about yogis arriving in Ireland. Actually, there's and all kinds of in these old texts that tell the history from the 15th and 16th century. And they talk about giants and they talk about these amazing gods and goddesses. In fact, it was one I just heard this morning where this giant had gone from one end of the earth to the other and arrived in Ireland, and they were aware he was talking about a man who had stopped the sun in the Middle East somewhere. They're talking about Jesus well before Christianity was even a thing. So that's so much.
So many similar legends and myths.
Yeah, but
right.
the people are exactly the same. The culture is identical, and I know this because I felt it intuitively. But now we have all the proof, and we're looking at all this stuff, and it's amazing. The same people. That's fascinating to me. And I knew it anyway. My grandmother was treating my burns with ghee. She would clarify butter and put them on my cuts and my burns. It's right out of Ayurveda. And many Irish people do that.
Yes, perhaps the original route could have been the dispersion after Atlantis sank, because they said that the priests left and went to various parts of the world and brought their teachings and their language, and the Druids were remnants of the Atlantean culture.
Druvid, from the oak, the Drew, and the Vid from the Vedas.
There you go.
Learning
Another beautiful example of the connection.
The Brehon laws, the same as Brahman,
Oh,
right, yeah.
the Breton.
Brehon law.
Brehon.
Yeah, Brehon.
Brehon, yeah.
How do you spell that?
Brehon.
Oh, Brehon.
Yeah. And Brev is also a master of mantras, is what it means.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that comes from Brahmin?
Yeah, of course it does. It's exactly what's
Wow.
from. Yeah.
Great connections. I'm interested in hearing any more that you have to say about this too.
Yeah.
Well, there was another great figure in the 60s and prior to that called Sean O'Riordan, who was one of the people that changed a lot of ensemble playing and kind of took the music out of the houses and put them into theaters, and he was a director of this, that, and the other. But one of the things that he studied was actually Indian and Oriental music. He actually studied those. And there's a little clip of him talking about how the music of Ireland is more related to Asian music than it is to European music.
His son has actually taken up the mantle, and he lives in Bellavorna, in West Cork. In fact, I was in the Mills Inn having dinner. Actually, we were playing a session, and he walked in with two Indian guys, and they were doing a concert.
In Ireland?
In Ireland, yeah.
Wow.
He walked in, and I said to your man there, I said, I know that guy. He's a very famous tabla player. And I said, I want to go and talk to them. I did for a while. They were doing a concert on Saturday night, and I'd left Saturday day because I couldn't go. But yeah, so he's doing a lot of that work, his son, and it's really seamless, the music together, both of them. It makes sense. Anyway.
Yeah, so they were hinting at it, back then, and they were trying to make those connections, and nobody was really paying attention too much at that time. Only because they were interested in trying to preserve the culture of Ireland. The Irish music almost died out
In the famine, which is genocide, not a famine, but right.
But basically, what happened was, they were losing their traditions. They were losing their culture, either because of either political oppression or many other things. People not wanting to pick up music, that type of thing. It wasn't the thing to do. But there were these certain key figures now, which are considered legends, basically, of the music. Whether they were technically gifted or not was besides the point. The fact that they were scholars, they were archivists, they were the ones that went out and actually recorded. Like at people's houses, they tried to record all these things. The idea of a pub session or people getting together with various instruments and sitting down did not exist in Ireland. That actually came from America. So they would play at
Pizza
house
effect,
parties.
all that.
Yeah, the pizza effect. And so they would basically go and play at somebody's house, type of thing. And that's where the music came together. That's where you would try to meet people. But because the transportation in Ireland wasn't very good, we have all these regional styles of Irish music, just like we have regional styles of music in India. Yeah. It's the same thing. So exactly. Northern Ireland, the south of Ireland, the west of Ireland, they all have various types of melodies that are played that are popular there, a style of playing, either the flute or the fiddle, or those types of things. And but as it relates to trying to propagate Irish culture, there was then basically an organization formed called Cultus Kiltoriaran, which basically means Irish Musicians Association. And cultus, for better or for worse, were the people that came in and tried to preserve this culture. So it's now because of that, and those individuals who were had the forethought to say, well, Irish music is very special, that it has basically proliferated across the entire world. I mean, there are cultus branches in many different places, but you don't have to have an organized, group of Irish musicians. You just have people in Japan. You've got people in Slovakia. They have people in Brazil, Cuba, all of these places that are picking up Irish music and just playing it because they fall in love with it. There's something that connects them to that. It's almost like the people that have come into the Indian traditions or Hindu or any of these other types of Buddhism
Kirtan,
who've come into it because they feel a connection to it. They feel the connection. They don't have to be taught the connection. They feel the connection. So either spiritually or musically speaking. And then the other thing I would just mention was like the bagpipes, for instance, which is so popular in Scotland, the Great Highland Bagpipe that originated in China. And there's many Asian bagpipes, and almost every European country has their own type of bagpipe because of that. The Appian Way, all of these types of things that were available back in ancient times, where people moved back and forth. And then just the instruments themselves, the drums. There's drums in Ireland, drums in India. The flutes, connection, the stringed instruments.
Yeah.
These types of things, they share a great connection, and somehow they blend together almost seamlessly. And that's the connection is just very obvious. We can talk about it academically, but if you hear it, and in some of the pieces that we've recorded recently, you can hear, well, obviously there's something there, and many times it's indistinguishable between what's what, and people have to ask us the question: was that Irish or was that Indian? Mm-hmm. So that's where we are right now.
It's beautiful, and I like the way you describe that, Stuart. What I would say with everything you've shared is that the Indian and the Irish music are both soul-stirring. They awaken something in the soul, and I especially think that about bagpipes, because I don't know what happens whenever I hear bagpipes. I must be going back to a Scottish past life, but this is music that wakens humanity, that brings up remembrances of perhaps past lives or perhaps where the soul has been. And it just opens up a whole field of consciousness and awareness that other music doesn't do.
Well, we're remembering or attempting to remember who we really are.
Exactly.
Right? So
Johnny
that's what
Coe.
we're doing. We're going back to remember our true nature.
So, with that being said, I think it would be good to close out this podcast with a soul-stirring song played by Shakti Das and Padma Das. I want to thank my guests, Johnny Coe, Shakti Das, and Padma Das.
Thank you.
Stuart Peak, forming the duo Kalyana, sharing this beautiful music and all this insightful information about the connection between Indian and Irish music. This is Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine, sending you healing Irish and Indian musical vibrations through the quantum field.
So the piece we're going to play now, I'm going to sing a mantra. It's Amataye, and it's a hymn to the Divine Mother. And I'll dedicate this in loving memory to my brother Gary. It would have been his birthday today. So. Amataye Akilaneshwariniye Annapurneshwaritaye O Aripara Shaktiniye Amataye Akilaneshwariniye Annapurneshwaritaye O Aripara Shaktiniye Amamataye Akilaneshwariniye Annapurneshwaritaye O Aripara Shaktiniye Annapurneshwaritaye, oh, Hare Para Shakti Niye, oh, Hare Para Shakti Niye, oh, Hare Para Shakti Niye.